Next up, we have Montana DOT.
Good morning. My name is Jody Bachini. I'm with Montana Department of Transportation, and I'm actually in our maintenance division. I'm a maintenance reviewer or program specialist. And then we have Mary Gail Padmos with us today, who is also in our pavement management section. Montana is Montana is a rural state. We have very, very different demographics, from the mountains in the west to the plains in the east, and therefore our roads behave very differently, and the issues that we have vary greatly on what issues we may be dealing with, from the oil fields that are in eastern Montana and the large trucks that are traveling over it, or a lot of the freeze-thaw issues that we run into in the Rocky Mountains. We go from very, very hard material to areas where it's clays, and everything basically requires taking a good look at it and trying to determine what are the base issues that we're dealing with for our pavement preservation. Montana's number one treatment that we use for pavement preservation is our chip seals. And for 40 to 50 years, that's been a requirement for Montana. Within 1 year, we chip seal the roads that we pave. So if it gets paved early in the season, they chip it within that season. Our chip seals have to be completed by the end of August. If it doesn't get paved early in the season, then it rolls over into the next spring, and then they start up in April, depending on weather. We really didn't have a great year this year. I think we had a couple months of paving for the most part between the snow and the rain. But this has made a huge difference. Minimal life extension is 6 years on average. We do see some areas where we put a super pave down and a chip seal, and we don't touch it for another 12 to 15 years. Crack seal and mastic, that's usually once the chip seal's down, that's the first thing that we a lot of times will do to a road. Crack seal if it's relieving the stress, and then mastic if we have a lot of base issues or larger cracks. Some raveling, we'll use it. We've been using it since about 2012. It's very popular within the state. We started using it in our maintenance division, and it's spread throughout all of our divisions, which we have 10 in the state. And now construction is utilizing it, and they've been using it for the last couple years. There is no AASHTO specification on mastic. They're working on it. I had the great fortune of working with several mastic suppliers to come up with a specification that we use in Montana. We wrote it for our maintenance division, and then our construction or engineering division has now copied that and is utilizing it. Rut filling. We actually, in the last couple years, have started to contract out our rut filling. So if we have areas where we have a lot of rutting or maybe some raveling, we will go in with a contract and maybe pick 2, 3, 4 different roads in that area, and then put out these rut fill contracts to say, hey, we need a couple 100 ton of plant mix on these roads at these locations. So far it's worked out pretty well. They usually bring in a paver. An experienced contractor who's used to dealing with this, they do very well. If it's not, something maintenance should have probably done. So it's something that we're working on. Some contractors are game for it, some are not. So we try to make it big enough that it's something that they would want to bid on. And it takes some of the relief and pressure off of our maintenance crews to go out there, because usually this will be a 1 to 2 week ordeal to do rut filling within the different divisions. Scrub seals are one of the latest tools that we have in our toolbox. We're into our 3rd year of scrub seals. They're performing very well in the state. I put 3+ years up because we do not know the life expectancy in Montana for a scrub seal. We actually have one we're starting our 3rd year with that looks fairly close to the day that we put it down. There are some frost heaving issues. It's on a mountain pass over by Bozeman, and I don't know what you could do other than a lot of geotechnical work to take care of that. So it's actually holding up better than a lot of our chip seals would in those conditions. So the scrub seals have been a great tool. They've kind of been the missing key that our maintenance chiefs have been looking for between doing chip sealing and having to do a mill and fill or an overlay. So they really are appreciating this. And then, of course, we have our chip seals. We started in 2013 to use CHF RS2P, a high float. We've had some really good luck with it. We have some areas that strictly, that's all that they use. We have other areas that choose to use CRS 2P, and then they put a fog seal over the top of it. So right now, we're kind of weighing the cost, which way is better for us, or do we just, allow them to use all those tools, which is where we're at now. In the last couple years, our engineering side has picked up the high float oil, and they've been using it on their projects. A lot of areas in construction are picking up the fog seal, which seems to help out. It's a good insurance for us. Not so much on our maintenance side, but on our construction side, they've been working on microsurfacing, and we have some that have been down 8+ years. It's still in the experimental phase. We've had a few that haven't worked out that great. Probably the engineered emulsion was part of the issue. Surfacing design in our construction's really been working hard on trying to figure out the best microsurfacing, and they're getting better every year. Our last resort is our mill and fills and our overlays. 10 to 15+ years. Back about 20 years ago, I was a bituminous pavement engineer for the state when we were doing our own mixed designs. Lifts were a little bit thicker. We were at 15 years and pushing for 20 years. And then it was probably about 2006, 2008. A way to save money is to thin up those mats. On the maintenance side, I think we see that it may not have been the best decision because we are getting roads that aren't hitting those 15 to 20 years. They're falling in the 10 to 15 year range. And that's putting a little more stress on our maintenance crews to keep those roads together. And then we have our experimental projects like our hot in place recycle and cold in place recycle. We just did a hot in place recycle just outside of Helena this past year, and it turned out excellent. It looks very promising, especially on a lot of the roads that we have in eastern Montana. They're now planning for at least a couple per year. Industry's really been helping us out with trying to figure these out. We did a couple years ago a cold in place recycle, and then they put an overlay over the top of it, and that's performed extremely well. One of the biggest, I think, effects for pavement preservation in Montana is the partnering that we do between our engineering and our maintenance forces. Maintenance is able to get a contract out within a couple months, so we can identify a road, figure out what treatment we want to try, and get that contract out in a couple months, and then have it built within a couple months, and then see how the effects are on a small scale. And that allows engineering to not put forth a bunch of money and then have something fail and the egg all over the face, and nobody wants to try it again. So our maintenance forces try it, and it usually takes a couple years, and we figure out what works best, what are some hiccups that we've had, and then we turn it over to engineering, and then they go forward with it on a larger scale. And so that's worked out extremely well. It works out a lot of the bugs, and it gets the people talking between our engineering side and our maintenance side to see what are the issues that maintenance has to deal with, and then engineering can kind of design towards those issues. Another thing we have on engineering is our guideline for pavement preservation. We started this in 1999 with an agreement with FHWA, and it has since been revised multiple times, and it's available so that all the engineers have this to use as a guide for how to treat our pavement preservation. Due to a response to a legislative audit, maintenance developed our nomination guideline for pavement preservation, which is very similar to the engineering guideline. And this actually helps improve the process and the communications between our engineering and our maintenance. And then we developed this project nomination guideline form for our maintenance chiefs. And this requires that they have to do research, which they had done before, but now we physically can see the research that they've done on what was the past project in that area. Did they look at the recommendations from pavement management, and what were those recommendations? How did they fall on what the project is that you're doing? Are you doing the recommendation, or are you varying, maybe instead of a chip seal, you are only doing a crack seal, but you have to justify why you're only doing a crack seal? Or let's say it only calls for a crack seal, and that maintenance chief knows it needs a chip seal because they see a little more issues, maybe there's some oxidation. They will go ahead and write that in here. So it's the justification on why they're choosing the treatment that they're choosing. Also with the legislation, we had some issues with the contract community feeling like maintenance was stepping on their toes, taking away some of the projects that they could do. And then again, we also had our legislative audit looking at the costs for maintenance to do, say, a chip seal. and finding that it was more cost-effective for maintenance to perform the chip seal versus a contractor. So we came up with this contractor MDT cost comparison, which is also a requirement that on the maintenance side that our chiefs have to do. And we take a 3-year average of the different treatments. So if it's a crack seal or a chip seal or a scrub seal, I think we have rut filling, and we've added mastic to it. So it takes a 3-year average of what it costs for those contractors to do the work, and it also, we have our averages through our MMS system of what it costs for maintenance to do the work, and then they do these cost comparison sheets to see which one's more cost effective. And so sometimes it may be that maintenance is cheaper to do the work, but it may take our forces 2 to 3 weeks to do the work, and we just don't have the time or the crews to do that because it'll take multiple sections to, say, perform maybe a rut fill or a chip seal. And so then they can justify in here that, yes, it was more cost effective for maintenance to do it, but because of the timeline and the work that would be ignored for maintenance to do this work, we're putting it out to contract. So it's a good tool, and it actually gives our maintenance chiefs, our superintendents, and our section supervisors a way to look at what are the true costs. So with these tools, MDT can establish what our framework is going to be and formalize a process on what we're doing for our pavement projects, and basically ensure that we're addressing the needs for our pavement preservation. With our MMS and our PVMS, we're gathering the history that's happening to these roads, we're housing that information, and basically it allows us to look for the right treatment to the right pavement at the right time, to be able to see what's happened to these roads, what type of maintenance has been done on these roads, how long have they been down, what treatment did you use. That's huge for us. Passing on the knowledge to the next generation, we're doing that with the guides that we provide, our trainings, the tools that we have, our history. In maintenance, we cross-train our reviewers, so my specialty is in pavement preservation. We have a reviewer who specializes in our weeds, our epoxy, our winter maintenance, and so I teach them pavement preservation. They in turn teach me about winter maintenance and the treatments that we use for winter maintenance. And so then we can spread that information to our maintenance chiefs, our superintendents, any engineering that calls up and asks for advice. So that's been a great tool. We also have a contract administration course that we do on our maintenance side, and that allows us to go through all this project nomination, what it takes to look for a project, what you should be looking for, who should you call when you're not sure, do I do a crack seal here, do I do a chip seal? You know, is it better to do a crack and chip seal, or do I do a scrub seal? And so they know the right tools, who to call. It gives them a guide. And with our MMS and our PVMS, it helps so that in the design phase, so let's say we have to do a reconstruct on these roads, our designers can go back and look at that history and maybe do something a little different. You know, maybe it's an area that it gets a lot of moisture and we need to really address some of the soil issues. So by having those histories, by collecting that data and that information, it's really starting to change how we're looking at designing these roads and some of the treatments that we're using. So probably our biggest rival that we have in Montana is the snow. And it seems like we have a larger season of snow removal than we do of pavement preservation. When the snow's gone, that's when we really see the issues. And actually, I have to say that our roads have performed very well because of those chip seals that we put down initially. They have really helped save a lot of the damage that would happen with our plows, especially with the high float. That high float oil really grabs onto those chips and sticks, and so we've had minimal chip loss with our plows, which is huge on the maintenance side, because ultimately, if we rip off that seal, we're going to deal with the issues that we expose that road to. All right, thank you.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.